Okay, so my setup is very in its infancy because I don't have there's an Elgato. I don't know all the parts, but I can't. So I have this DVD and I want to record the intro, but I'm not able to do that because my HD60S can't do some other letters that are combined that allow a DVD to be recorded while I play it. So this is old. I told my wife it's from 1921, but she didn't believe me. But it's really old. I don't remember how long I've had this. But I found it very inspirational, like even 20 years ago. So I'm going to see if I can record the intro.
On August 8th, 2005, 100 delegates from 14 countries arrived in Dawson City, the site of the Klondike Gold Rush, to inquire into the condition of the gold market. The following is a summary of their findings. Gold has been and remains money. The most important money in the world. The only immutable and lasting currency. Potentially the most powerful currency.
The United States military, when it packs the emergency kits of its fighter pilots, does not pack them with US dollars or euros or yuan or yen or any of the paper currencies. It packs them with these little things. 100-year-old quarter-ounce British sovereigns, gold coins. Why is that? That's because at all times and in all circumstances, this remains money.
Yes.
Because the world has forgotten the monetary role of gold, our world is in serious, very, very serious trouble. That is the one major reason for the present worrisome state of the world. The abandonment of gold as money, of the discipline of gold, is the major reason, if not the only reason, why our world has become a very dangerous place.
The future of gold depends on the opportunity for gold to do what it has always done throughout history, namely to provide a neutral tool that people can use voluntarily, without force or coercion, as currency as we go about our business each day, participating in our market economy to fulfill our needs and wants.
That's always the key, right? Without force or coercion.
Central banks have collectively suppressed the price of gold by the sometimes open and sometimes surreptitious dishoarding of their gold reserves.
You don't spend a lot of time on Wall Street or in the venture capital end of the private equity business without running across rigged markets. In fact, if there was a price-fixing cartel at work, so much the better. A nimble outsider can make good money busting or riding cartels. But as I got into it, I learned the gold market was not like, say, amino acids or potash. Here, the price of an asset was being suppressed, not supported. And not by users, but by owners. And not for obvious reasons. I'd never run into this pattern before. If you own a lot of something, why run a cartel to keep its price down?
When you get a financial crisis, historically gold would respond rapidly. And it would be like a place of protection in a financial crisis. In the last 10 years, the central banks have effectively shown that when there's a real crisis, gold actually goes down. And then it's so blatant, it's a joke.
The confounding part about the manipulation of the gold price is that it's so obvious for everyone to recognize. As was mentioned earlier, in the summer of 1998, Fed Chairman Greenspan testified twice before Congress saying central banks shall lease gold in increasing quantity should the price rise. Ever since then, that's exactly what they've been doing.
We also know that the central banks have been rigging the gold price for a very simple reason. That is, we know because they and their intermediaries working to suppress the price time and again have told us so. After all, what was the Washington Agreement of September 1999 if not a proclamation of the 15 participating central banks that they were colluding to regulate the gold price? Central bankers are not the only ones in the gold business who acknowledge collusion to control the gold price. The biggest hedger among the gold mining companies, Barrick Gold, has gone so far as to confess in federal court in New Orleans to participation in this scheme. Sued along with its bullion bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, by Blanchard & Company, the New Orleans coin and bullion dealer, Barrick filed a surprisingly candid motion in court on February 28, 2003. Barrick moved for dismissal of Blanchard's lawsuit on grounds of sovereign immunity. That is, Barrick claimed that in borrowing gold from central banks through Morgan Chase, Barrick became the agent for central bank gold policy. That is, the agent of central banks, the company could not properly be sued without suing the real parties in interest, the central banks, as well. And that since the central banks, as the agencies of sovereign governments, have immunity and could not be made party to the Blanchard suit, the whole suit should be dismissed.
Oleg Mozhaikov, the deputy chairman of the Russian Central Bank, in a speech a year ago to the bullion dealers, cited Gada's work about the suppression of the gold price. And he said, according to their work, if gold were to have kept up with inflation, gold would be between $740 and $750 US. That's the #2 guy at the Russian Central Bank.
Central banks are suppressing the gold price to make their own currencies seem stronger and to build confidence in the international reserve currency, the US dollar.
I quickly came in contact with other people who'd homed in on Gada's beacon. They helped me to understand the bigger picture, that gold is money, real money, and as such poses a mortal threat to the fiat dollar-based monetary system. The preservation of the bank's power to create what we use as money is infinitely more important than the price of a portfolio asset. The only reason the banks held on, or pretended to hold on, to their gold inventories was to maintain their control over the market and to keep the exchange value down in relation to their competing paper franchise.
You don't need a conspiracy theory to know the gold price is manipulated. The central banks have said we're selling gold. Now they're either stupid or they've got a good reason. I don't think they're stupid. So what's the good reason? The good reason is that they want to prolong the longevity of the irredeemable bits of paper that they issue as money. Simple as that.
Now, just the other day, I reread a statement that Prime Minister Blair made when the British began their gold auctions in 1999. And he was asked, why are you doing this? Blair said, well, I'm selling because it's a bad investment. Now, the bottom line is that looking back, the average price he got for the gold was $275 an ounce. That's a figure of public record. The price the other day was $438 versus $275 over a 5-year period. In relation to the performance of currencies, it wasn't very clever. So, Blair's not stupid. So the chances are he wasn't being stupid, he was being dishonest. He was selling it not because he wanted to invest it into dollars. He was selling it because he was trying to do his friends a favor. Add to the supply, keep the price down, because the financial system at the time was under pressure.
Now, what I find most reprehensible about this whole charade is that we have seen this act before, and it failed spectacularly in its first run in the late 60s and early 70s. At least the London Gold Pool, which was in effect at that time, was a considerably more open attempt to hold the gold price in the neighborhood of $35 and maintain the fiction that the US dollar was as good as gold. However, it was overcome by the reality of a large US budget deficit driven by the attempts to conduct the Vietnam War while financing the Great Society, an explosion in oil prices, which ultimately took the price from under $3 to $40, and rampant inflation throughout the system.
the value of paper currency came into question and gold rose from $35 to roughly $800 per ounce in less than a decade. It wasn't corralled until Paul Volcker took over the reins of the U.S. Fed and, using draconian methods, squeezed the inflation out of the U.S. system for a very short period of time. Now here we are, 25 years after the previous peak, and they're at it again, aggressively suppressing the gold price in an attempt to protect the world's totally fiat monetary system. I'm not sure what is more pathetic at this point. The renewed attempt by the powers to be to control the gold price in the face of their previous failure, or the investing public's blithe disregard of history and acceptance of the current status quo. I really think that the current gold suppression scheme looks like an act of desperation, which will soon be overrun.
But these truths are just part of a much larger, more monstrous truth, which is that the rig is run to prop up a monetary system that is immoral and in conflict with the foundational law of the United States. And here's where it gets tricky. The rig is just a means to an end, but it is a vital and an indispensable means to that end. The deeper you dig, the more vital it seems to be. Our monetary system is, after all, just a confidence game. If people lose confidence in the dollar, the system doesn't so much collapse as evaporate. There is no better way to undermine confidence in government's funny money than to let real money run free.
Annual gold demand is 1,500 tons above production. The gap is being filled and the price held down by central bank dishoarding. The central banks are accounting for their remaining gold reserves deceptively.
The reason the price of gold is hundreds of dollars per ounce below where it should be is because the gold cartel has clandestinely lent out more than 16,000 tons of gold from the coffers of the central banks to keep the price from rising. This means the central banks has less than half the gold they say they have in their vaults.
Not only are central banks guilty of disinformation, deception is one of their most frequently used tools. The history of banking is replete with examples that are not just the lack of disclosure, but rather outright deception. To give just but one example, look today how they account for gold loans. They carry gold in the vault and gold out on loan as one line item. In effect, they're saying they are above generally accepted accounting principles and that they can as a result report cash and accounts receivables as one and the same thing. Accounting like that would make even the people at Enron blush.
Key in my mind is the fact that a considerable amount of the central bank gold has already been mobilized over the past 10 years in the carry trade business and the ongoing price suppression scheme. And since it cannot be sold a second time, this fact will become the major determinant in the direction of gold prices in the not too distant future. These guys are running out.
They cannot get this gold back. They say they lent it. When you lend something out, you expect to get it back if you're lending it. They can't get it back because at this point in time, demand is more than 1,500 tons greater than supply. The only reason the price isn't going crazy now is because they're surreptitiously taking the central bank gold, giving it to the bullion dealers, and the bullion dealers are putting supply into the market. Once that supply is gone, the price has to go bananas.
The central banks have a very serious problem, and that problem is the physical market. The Middle Easterners are buying gold at an extraordinary pace. What this essentially means is that the central banks have a tiger by the ears, because these people out there will not be satisfied with anything except physical.
Physical.
It's simply a question of when they run out.
Yep.
Demand is clearly on the rise for any number of reasons, but the greatest aspect of it is the monetary nature. I mean, people are beginning to see gold as an alternative to paper currencies. The demand for investment purposes is rising. But this is starting from a situation where the demand for gold generally, for the more conventional uses, jewelry, industrial demand, small bar hoarding in the East, was well ahead of sort of mine supply. So I see, because of investment demand, the demand for gold rising fairly significantly in the upcoming years. At the same time, that there is no way in the next 3 or 4 years gold mine supply is going to do anything but decline. It's currently somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 tons. It should decline closer to 2,000 tons. And there's nothing you can do about it because it's basically baked in the cake, essentially, because there hasn't been enough exploration and there's not a lot of new projects ready to go. And it takes a long time today with the permitting issues and everything else to get a new mine into production. So production from the ground is not going up. And if demand rises, like I think, you've got an interesting sort of supply-demand.
The cheering thing is, they got into this thinking that they could sell 100, 200 tons a year for the next 100 years and then worry about it. It turns out, in fact, they're having to ship out, who knows, 5, 8, 10% of their remaining stock, perhaps even more, in physical form, plus what they're having to sell in the option market to deal with the occasional forays of the hedge funds. So, it's later in the day than everybody thinks. Thank you.
Let me enumerate just a few of the reasons why the situation for gold enthusiasts is better this time than it was in the 70s. I mean, first and foremost, and we've talked about this before, the central banks have parted with a far greater quantity of their gold this time than they did the last time, and far more than is generally known. And they've obscured that fact with the bogus accounting endorsed by the IMF. I mean, receivables are not distinguished from gold. This was talked about earlier, but I mean, I think it's really significant that the receivables are not distinguished from gold held in the vault, thereby obscuring how much metal has already been dumped into the market. And the second great point is that there are a number of new influential players on the central bank scene who are not under the hegemony of the U.S. However, the central banks today, in the Far East, China, Russia, etc., they've been accumulating remarkably huge reserves, primarily U.S. dollar denominated. And at some point, I believe they will be delighted to relieve the Western central banks of whatever further gold they feel that they may wish to dispose of. And then lastly, there is infinitely more paper this time around, depreciating crappy paper money in comparison to the outstanding gold stock than there was in the 70s. So thus, I would say that despite immense frustration on the part of the gold enthusiasts at this time, and I'm certainly falling into that camp, the people with the real problem are the bears. The fact that this is also abundantly clear to me, as clear as it is to many of you in this room, at a time when the vast majority of society can absolutely care less about the subject, is perhaps the most bullish aspect of all.
The reluctance of central bankers around the world to think of gold or silver as money is going to be overcome. There's going to be a change in attitude.
Yes.
When the frightening, terrifying disaster finally strikes upon us,
Mexican silver,
then there is going to be a change of mind, and that is when I think that this idea of how to introduce silver and gold too into circulation in parallel with paper will become attractive.
Absolutely.
This is the one metric that appeals to my partner Eric Sprott and I, and that is the historical ratio of the price of an ounce of gold in relation to that of a barrel of oil. In a relationship that has been in effect since the gold price was unleashed in 1971, the price of an ounce of gold has traded on average in the sort of succeeding 34 years at an average of 15 times that the price of a barrel of oil. Today, the ratio is 7 to 1. And if the historic relationship were in effect, the current price for gold would be roughly $800 to $900.
Does it really make any sense? The gold-oil ratio at an extreme, for the oil companies to be putting money into buying back their shares. They're just basically buying oil at a very high price. And And if you look at the kind of money they're spending, well, maybe they should just buy gold.
If people think that $400 gold is a lot, it's nothing. The price of gold probably is going to clear $2,000 an ounce before this is all over. So once the gold cartel is exposed, once the light shines upon them, they're done for, because everyone's going to buy up the really small amount of gold that's left. And people don't understand that, and that's what this conference is all about. We want to make them aware of what is coming, and once they're sure of it, there'll be another gold rush, just like there was in the 70s.
The fact of the matter is that when people in the investment community decide, and whatever it takes to get them to decide, I don't know, but when they do, the central banks will be taken out in the flick of an eyelid. And I just believe that we mustn't get too defensive about this. In 1980, 5% of investment monies worldwide was in gold and gold shares. It would take just a tenth of that percentage to take central banks completely out of their gold.
I believe we must labor to expand and amplify support behind data. 1, because the economics of our business demands it. 2, because the synergy from our combined efforts will prosper it. And 3, because the folks who pay our way deserve it.
Having come to the heart of gold country to inquire into the condition of the monetary metals and the industry that produces them, we conclude and declare, while governments affect to have no use for them anymore, the monetary metals are of greater importance than ever because of their ability to hold value independent of arbitrary government power. Since they issue competing currencies, governments have a powerful interest in suppressing what is perceived as the value of the monetary metals. Governments have achieved this suppression through strategic and often surreptitious lending and dishoarding of their metal reserves. While it is seldom officially acknowledged as such, this is the manipulation of currency and commodity markets that should be free and transparent. To assist in the suppression of the monetary metals, and at the urging of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF member governments engage in deceptive accounting of their gold, deliberately confusing gold in the vault with gold that has been leased or swapped or whose ownership otherwise has been impaired. We believe that individuals and nations alike have the right to decide what they will use as money, even as we acknowledge that freely traded gold and silver is simply the most convenient guarantors of economic liberty.
The question is, do we want to, is the goal here to end the manipulation or expose it, and then end it? Because once people, the biggest money in the world, knows what we know and what's coming, it'll be like the end of the London gold pool. Everybody will want to get there first. But once the people really know the status and what these people have done, that's the exciting thing for everybody here. Once they know this, it's hallelujah time. We want to make it happen this year, not 2 or 3 years from now.
Shout out to you, Gerrit.
June 4th, 2004. Oleg Mozikov, Deputy Chairman of the Central Bank of Russia.
Many have heard of the group of economists who came together in the society known as the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. They believe some senior officials have been manipulating the market since 1994. As a result, the price dropped below 300 US an ounce at a time when it should, if it had kept pace with inflation, reached from 740 to 760 US dollars.
August 8th, 2005. A highly regarded economic consultant to Russian President Vladimir Putin, Andrei Bykov, attends the Gold Rush 21 conference. August 11th, 2005. The price of gold broke the $6 price capping rule. Gold rallied $84 per ounce in the ensuing 4 months, despite a rising dollar. November 22nd, 2005. Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The central bank should review its gold and forex reserves policy in favor of increasing the weighting of gold.